That there's a genre of svarim called Sifrei Chakira within Yiddishkeit, but the Chassidim it was never really studied much.
Hakira?
Chakira, yeah.
Hakira means to know.
Sorry?
Like to know.
Hakira is philosophy.
Oh, okay.
Philosophy.
What was your phone
Like more Nevuchim?
Nevuchim, Amonis Videis, Kuzari, right. I'm not saying that no Chassidim learned it. It wasn't. One of the things they would say is that these svarim, they ask questions on Amunah. And the fear is that someone is going to learn the question. They're going to be tired, they'll go to sleep that night, and they'll have the question in his head, and they won't have the answer. And the question, sorry?
Like Sheldon?
That's why do you think I'm talking about this?
The Google.
And also, if you look in Tanya never ends a parak with a question. Always, so by the time you finish, you always have the answer to your question. Theoretically, I guess you're supposed to learn a parak in one sitting. We had 7-8 hours, we could learn this parak in one sitting. But there's one exception to this rule in Sharichah V'Amunah, in Perik Gimel, Sharichah V'Amunah concludes with a question. The shaila is that since all of us, we're kolul in our makar, we are subsumed in our source. Our source is the divine energy that gives us life, and we are within it. So, why is it that we're not batal b'metzias? Why do we feel ourselves to be a separate entity from Hashem? To understand this, we have to go and we have to give a preface and move on to Perik Dalet. So suddenly over here, we ended off, the Perik ends off with a question. So they would say, that's a question that if you fall asleep with at night, it's not a bad question. So why do I feel myself as an independent entity? Why do I have an ego? Why am I not batal b'metzias to Hashem? That's a kosher question to have. Anyways, good. We actually, I thought we were going to get to the answers today. I'm hoping that we'll finish the questions today. We'll see. I'm not very good at
27?
26. I'm actually not good at assessing how much material we'll learn in a given class, which is why I always over-prepare, and then we see where it takes us. So I don't know. Yeah. Okay. So actually, we're on 284. So we're let's recap. Last week, we read a lengthy passage from the Zohar, from the Rai Mehemna, and the primary ideas of the Zohar was that the Zohar is called Eitz HaChaim. The Zohar is called the tree of life, and because the Yidden will learn the Zohar, the tree of life, the Kabbalah, so we'll be Zoichet to Mashiach. And then he says that when Mashiach comes, we're no longer going to be involved with Isser v'Heter, Tumah v'Tara, because all of these things, that's all Eitz Hadas Tevera. That's all from the Eitz Hadas. And that's why there's questions and machlokes. Mashiach comes, we're going to be dealing only with Eitz HaChaim. We're going to learn Kabbalah only. And he says that he says that now, during the times of Galus, so the Talmidei Chachamim, because the Eitz Hadas dominates, so therefore Talmidei Chachamim, they receive their sustenance from the Ami Haaretz, from the Erev Rav, who eat Tomei, Pasul, etc. Just like Shabbos, Talmidei Chachamim, like Shabbos receives its sustenance from the weekday. The cholent that you eat on Shabbos, right, was made before Shabbos. When Mashiach comes, no longer is that going to be the case. When Mashiach comes, we're going to, the Talmidei Chachamim will be self-subsistent. To the contrary, the Ami Haaretz will need to rely on the Talmidei Chachamim for their sustenance. And when Mashiach comes, the Talmidei Chachamim, they're only going to have the Eitz HaChaim. They're going to learn only Kabbalah. But the Erev Rav, even when Mashiach comes, they're still going to be under the dominion of the Eitz Hadas, and therefore those poor people, they'll still be struggling with their Daf Yomi when Mashiach comes, as opposed to the people who are learning Kabbalah. They are going to be learning only Kabbalah when Mashiach comes. That is what it seems.
The temple, the halachas of running the temple. You need to learn halacha.
Right. We're going to get there. That's what it says in the Zohar. You're looking at me like I'm strange. That's what we learned. It's in a whole long passage from the Rai Mehemna, which we learned last week. See, you snooze, you lose. You miss a week, and you miss the excitement. What can I tell you?
You snooze, you lose. I like it.
The Alter Rebbe Sorry?
That's not in the Zohar. If you snooze, you lose.
Maybe it's Kisvei Ariyos, I'll have to... Anyways, Akapanim, as he said, the Alter Rebbe is going to proceed to dismantle the Zohar from every single side. We're talking about... I'm just going to ask at least 20, 25 questions on the Zohar. We started the questions last week. We're on page 284. You see where it says Vihine, that's where the questions begin, and the questions end on page 286, where it says Ach. So we have a full 2 pages of the Alter Rebbe, just literally taking it apart. The Alter Rebbe prefaces it by saying that based on the superficial understanding of this passage of the Zohar, the people who just lack the knowledge, Kabbalistic knowledge, and that's the Alter Rebbe proceeds to ask all these questions. We're in the middle of the questions, and just to tell you that what the Alter Rebbe is going to answer when we get there, Mirz Hashem, that we have a fundamental misunderstanding of this piece of Zohar. But all these questions are based on what the Zohar seems to be saying. So first, the Alter Rebbe says the notion that Kabbalah is Eitz HaChaim and the rest of Torah is Eitz HaDas is preposterous. The entire Torah is Eitz Chaim Hila Machzikim Ba, every single part of Torah, and all the Medrashim and the Gemaras that talk about Torah and refer to Eitz HaChaim, to say that's all talking about Kabbalah is ridiculous, especially since in the times of the Gemara, the Zohar was hidden, and there were very few people who learned Kabbalah, and to say that the Gemara says Eitz HaChaim is talking about the Kabbalah makes no sense. Second of all, and this is where we're in the middle over here, second of all, the Rebbe says, so one second, so you're saying Kabbalah is Eitz HaChaim, you're saying that the Mishnah and the Gemara, right, that's all Eitz HaDas. So Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, he was privy to the Zohar. So you'd think that he wouldn't have been involved in the Eitz HaDas, in the lowly Gemara, Mishnah, Braisa. But we find, how many times is Reb Shimon's name mentioned in the Mishnah?
He did both.
And in the Braisa. But why didn't he stick to Eitz HaChaim? And then he says, and also even in the Ma'ara, this is where we ended off last week, even in the Ma'ara, in the cave where Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was, which we know that's where he arrived at incredible spiritual heights. But what was he doing there? He was learning Gemara, he was learning Mishnah. How do we know? Because it says he brings down, right? He brings down from the Gemara, Masechta Shabbos, that when he comes out, and his son-in-law, Pinchas ben Yair, was crying because of all the sores on his skin, so Reb Shimon Bar Yochai said, relax. He says, it's because I was in the cave that I reached such high levels. And what is the high levels? The Gemara says that before he went into the cave, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai would ask Reb Pinchas ben Yair a question, talking about a question in the Halacha and the Mishnah, and Reb Pinchas ben Yair would give him 12 answers. And afterwards, Reb Pinchas ben Yair would ask Reb Shimon Bar Yochai a question, and Reb Shimon Bar Yochai would give him 24 answers. So we see what is Reb Shimon Bar Yochai doing in the cave. He was learning Mishnah. And now we're going to continue. Vigam. We're holding by Vigam, which is on page Kuf Mem Gimel, opposite of page 284. It's in the beginning of a parenthesis, in the middle of the page.
What's the first word on the line?
Bikach. It's the beginning of a parenthesis in the middle of the page.
Wait, was it?
The cock.
The kach.
Yeah. First word is Bikach.
Both over here.
Over here, oh.
Oh, the cock.
Oh, I see.
16.
Vigam, and also the MS. The truth is that Al Karchach, we must say that Iggeres came from Ma'ara. That the main thing that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, what were they preoccupied with in the cave? Haya Teiras HaMishnayis was learning the Mishnah. Tafrei Sidrei Mishnah Shoyi B'Yameim. The 600 Siddharim of Mishnah, which there was in those times, Ad Rabbeinu HaKodesh, until the times of Rabbeinu HaKodesh. Why? The Ilu Sefer HaZayar Vatikunim, because the Zayar, and Tikkun is Zayar. They could have finished that in 2-3 months. Because certainly they didn't have to repeat themselves more than once. So they were there 13 years. What were they doing? Certainly what they were learning was the 600 Sidrei Mishnah.
600 what?
Sidrei Mishnah, 600 Siddharim of Mishnah.
When Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai wrote the Zohar, how he write it down? He has
Sorry?
ink? He has ink? How he wrote it down?
I don't know if he wrote the Zohar in the cave. I don't know if Reb Shimon Bar Yochai wrote the Zohar or dictated the Zohar. I'm not sure.
This is before Rebbe or after Rebbe?
Before, he says, Ad Rabbeinu HaKodesh.
So that everything was just oral.
So,
Because
what are
Rebbe
these?
composed it in
Right,
Rebbe.
right. That's why I took a little pause waiting for someone to ask a question. What is the 600 Siddharim of Mishnah that we're talking about here? We know we have Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. We have 6 Siddharim.
Didn't they get lost?
So we have 63 Masechtas of Mishnah, and they're organized into 6 Siddharim. Sorry,
Sections.
right? And here we're talking about 600. So, by the way, when you're talking about
And it's not
600
a Derek
Siddharim,
Guzma?
600
No.
Because
Mesechtes.
many
No,
times the
no, it
Gemara
doesn't say
uses
that.
Derek Guzma. Here, there's a Masorah, there were 600.
600, yeah.
It could be Bryce's things that were not included. Is that what we're talking about? Like,
So the Nakuda is,
Where's the other 13?
and Nakuda is, as we know, that up until the time of Rabbeinu HaKodesh, so Shimon Bar Yochai lived a few generations before Rabbeinu HaKodesh, probably 2-3 generations before Rabbeinu HaKodesh. And up until the time of Rabbeinu HaKodesh, so we know that there was this, the rule of Torah Shabbal Peh was Torah Shabbal Peh. There was no written texts.
people had their notebooks maybe and things like that, right? Like
People had their notebooks, that's correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so maybe
yeah.
they had some notes.
Yeah,
Or something.
but that was, the talk about the biggest difference between now and then. Imagine walking into yeshiva, you see hundreds of people sitting and learning, and there's no svarim, there's no bookshelves.
They just talk to each other.
No, she edited it so that.
We'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. There's no bookshelves. There was no. They're just sitting opposite each other, tables upon tables, and they're talking with each other. There's no svarim. It's a strange sight to envision, to imagine, but that's the way it was. However, as you said, there were people were allowed to take notes themselves, and beferish, if you went to yeshiva, there was a text, a order. There was a system of learning, and there was everyone received from their teacher, and they gave over. So here's Masechta Shabbos, and here's Masechta Erev, and here's Masechta Sukkah. However, because there were different yeshivas and different teachers and many different machlokes, so therefore, invariably, what you got was every single yeshiva developed their own sidrei mishnah, their own mishnahs, and then you had all the yeshivas together. So between all the yeshivas, what was collected was 600 different sdarim. Doesn't mean that there were 600 different mesechtas. It means that actually there were 600 sdarim.
And they weren't uniform.
And every seder had many mesechtas that what?
And they weren't uniform.
They were not uniform.
Unlike Rabbi, who had them, in a
He
certain way,
edited
he
it.
was the arbiter of what should go in the
She
Mishnah.
saved
Right.
everything.
So Rabbi eventually, by the way, before you get to Rabbi, so for example, so you look in the Gemara says in Masechtas Erevin, it talks about the difference between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So why was halacha like Beis Hillel? So it says over there because they were humble. They state in the Gemara. So the Gemara says because they were humble. What was one of the ways that we saw that they were humble?
Going to listen to the other side.
Now they were listening in their Mishnah. Now you realize their Mishnah, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. This is 200 years, maybe even 300 years before Bila Nasi. But in their Mishnah, in other words, in their Seder, in their texts, which they had, wasn't written texts, but so they also included the opinion of Beis Shammai, and not only did they include the opinion of Beis Shammai, but they would put Beis Shammai before themselves. So in the Mishnah of Beis Hillel, which is what we have today also a lot, they would say Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai, on the other hand, in their Mishnah, they didn't have Beis Hillel. They censored out Beis Hillel because they felt Allah was like them. And Beis Hillel also felt Allah was like themselves.
And they
But at the
lived
same
in the
time, they had the humility to also include the other opinion also. Right? But so what do we see over here right away? That there was the Mishnah of Beis Shammai and the Mishnah of Beis Hillel, and it was a different text. And the same thing is in all these different yeshivas. Now, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai again was before Rabbeinu HaKodesh. So at his time, it was before Rebbe came along, and Rebbe Taka. So Rebbe lived in a golden era, meaning that this was in Eretz Yisrael during the times of the Roman occupation, which was a very difficult time for Klal Yisrael, which is why eventually pretty much everyone left and went to Bavel, and the Yiddishkeit
Although
and
they
Torah
let
Center
him do
left and
nothing.
went to Bavel.
They let him be Nasi, so that's something.
But it wasn't only him. They let
There were
the
a
Nisuim work.
series of
Yeah.
Nasiim.
But the point was that Rabbeinu HaKodesh, so he was number one. There are two things were working in his favor. Number one is that he had very friendly relationships with the government, with the emperor, with Antoninus, and number two, he was fabulously wealthy. So he was able to put these two together. He had the political ability and the financial ability to gather together all the Chachamim and Eretz Yisrael, and together they ratified and canonized the Mishnah that we have today, which became the authoritative Mishnah. But what they did was they
Consolidated.
took the 600 Siddur Mishnah. A lot of what didn't make it in Taka became Brisa, became Tisefta. But in times of Shem Beichai, that hadn't yet happened. So in times of Shem Beichai, there's still 600 Siddur Mishnah. So that's what Shem Beichai and his son, Rebbe Eliezer, were doing in the cave. Because he says, you can't say that they were only learning Zohar there, because how long does it take to do the Zohar? 2 months, 3 months. So, but there's also a deeper idea here, which is, as we mentioned earlier, the difference between Zohar and Kabbalah and Nigla is you learn a Mishnah, you learn a Gemara, and what do? You start asking questions, and you start probing, and you start analyzing. And based on the questions, you come up with new understanding, you come up with new applications. That's the way it is in the Mishnah, as we mentioned earlier. When it comes to halacha, when it comes to Nigla, so you have machlokes and you have questions. So therefore, even if they didn't have 600 Siddur Mishnah, even if they had only Shisha Siddur Mishnah, you could still spend 13 years. You can't say, oh, well, how long does it take to read through the whole Mishnah? It doesn't work that way, because every Mishnah you sit and you fight about it afterwards, right? You argue, you debate, you question, you answer. You ask a question, you answer 24 answers, as we mentioned before. But Kabbalah doesn't work that way. Kabbalah is not learned by analyzing and questioning, and there's no machlokes in Kabbalah. So therefore, Kabbalah is straightforward. Kabbalah is what's received. So therefore, in the Zohar, all it would take is the time it would take to actually say it, because definitely Rav Shimon Bar Yochai didn't have to say it twice, and definitely this is all saying that was received. So the 13 years, certainly what they were doing is they were learning Mishnah, which is apparently Eitz Hadas, Toivara. And this is Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Let's do further insight. So Chazal tell us, from the day the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the only place where Hashem finds himself is in the 4 Amos of Halacha. And please note, it doesn't say the 4 Amos of what? Of Kabbalah. Right? It doesn't say that. Now, if the Kabbalah is Eitz HaChaim, and the study of Halacha and Mishnah and all this Eitz HaDas, why would we say that Ein Leila HaKodesh Baruch Hu B'Elamei Ela Dal Damash Halacha? Okay, so up until now, the focus of all the questions has been on the notion that Nigla is that only Kabbalah is Eitz HaChaim, and all the other parts of Torah is Eitz HaDas.
Who said that? Where does that come from?
The Zohar.
So maybe they're promoting what they're selling. They're trying to. Every book publisher wants to promote what they're writing.
Okay, that's a
They're
definitely.
promoting Zohar. This one's promoting Mishnah. This one's promoting Tanya. This one's promoting.
That's definitely it's definitely a cynical.
Not cynical. It's just
But
how it goes. You
even
have to-
if you
I
put
mean,
everyone's
it's not
promoting
cynical. Of course,
themselves.
it's cynical. We're talking about the Zohar. We're talking about Shimon Bar Yochai.
But everyone believes what they're doing is the best.
To say that Shimon Bar
I
Yochai
didn't say
would promote his sefer by saying that that only that is Eitz HaChaim and everything else Eitz HaDas is ludicrous.
Okay.
Again, unless you think that he was a self, what's the word looking for? A self-aggrandizing person who was looking to promote himself and say things that aren't true. But that's, if we say that, then why are we sitting here?
To put it in a here, that's some water. If you put it in a more presentable way, the Zohar and Halacha could be on different levels. So, and at the same time, I mean, you can have a bookcase with different levels, and each level has svarim that are chashuv. But in other words, the Zohar could be saying on one level the Zohar is the most chashuv, so it's the Eitz Chaim. But the Bali Halacha would say that's true, but on a different level, Halacha is also the Eitz Chaim. It doesn't have to be a stira. I mean, that was my sense when
Okay, I hear you. I'm not sure exactly understand, but let's move on.
All right.
Alter Rebbe is going to have a different understanding of this whole thing. So up until now, again, the issue has been that the Zohar seems to make this claim, a bizarre claim, that only Kabbalah, only Zohar is Eitz HaChaim, and the rest of the Torah is Eitz HaDas, which the Alter Rebbe proceeds to destroy that understanding, and that was what we're doing in the last page and a half or so. Now we're going to move on to the next thing. The next thing is, furthermore, yesh lahafli hafli apala. The words the Alter Rebbe use are very. It's a wonder of a wonder of a wonder. What did the Zohar say though? Mashiach comes, we're learning only Kabbalah. How's it possible? Mashiach. When Mashiach comes, Mashiach comes, we're not going to have to know the halachas of Isser v'Heter, of what's forbidden and what's permitted. The Tumah v'Tara, that which is impure and that which is pure. How are we going to shech karbanis? V'gam chulin, and also how are we going to shech pashat animals to eat? Im lo yedu hilches drasa v'chalado shehiyah pa'is l'mashchita. If they're not going to know the halachas of drasa, chalada, and shia, which make a shchita puzzle. In general, there are 5 general halachas.
He sleeps on the floor, he sleeps on a stone. How do you know? There you go.
In general, there are 5 halachas that are important to know for shchita. Here, the Alter Rebbe only brings 3 of them. I guess he figured. I guess these are the 3 most common ones, and they are drasa, chalada, and shia. Drasa is that when a person shechs, you have to make sure that the neck is being cut by the sharpness of the knife, it's not being pressed. It's not being pressed. Like if you took an axe and boom, and you cuts over there, it's not the sharpness, it's the force. So that's something a sheikh has to be careful that when he's cutting, that it's that he's not exerting undue pressure. It's the sharpness of the knife that's slicing the animal. That's drasa. Chalada is that you have to shecht straight. Not if you stick the knife in and then you cut from the inside. That also makes a puzzle. And shehiyah means that when you cut, you have to cut without stopping. If you stop in the middle, it can be problems. Yeah, one shot. So if people don't know these halachas, how are they able to shecht? And the only way to learn these halachas is by learning it in the Mishnah, the Gemara, and the Shulchan Aruch. And then further, pgimas hasakin. And then also we know there's this idea of that the knife has to be perfectly smooth.
That's why they have
Anyone who knows a sheikhet knows that I have a friend who became a sheikhet. Remember back in the day, he spent literally hundreds of hours, learning how to sharpen a knife properly. And by the way, they sharpen and they sharpen and they sharpen and they sharpen and they sharpen. And then they bring it to their teacher, and the teacher looks at it, you keep on sharpening and sharpening and sharpening. And then they have to learn how to test it against their nail, or some people test it against their tongue, and a tiny little pegima, and this is big work. You have to learn the halachas of that. When Mashiach comes, are we saying that people will be born naturally? That a person is born, I'm a sheikhet. Beli shia drasa, a person who's a natural sheikhet, and therefore just naturally he doesn't ever do shia or drasa. And moreover, v'gam also hasakin tiyabriya ve'medas. Believe gimal oilam. Are you telling me that when Mashiach comes, the knives are going to stay perfect forever? Of course not. You have to learn this stuff. You have to learn how to do it. You have to learn how to make a knife. You have to learn how to check a knife. You have to learn the halachas. Moreover, harba halach hilchis chelev v'dam. How many halachas are there that are associated with chelev? Removing the chelev and dam, blood. Shar Yisurim. These are halachas that we don't have to know today. Most of us chelev and dam is not so relevant to us because we have what's something called a butcher that does it for us. But days, in years past,
they would kasher their own liver,
kasher their own stuff, right?
The chelev Sfaradim hold from the chelev. Ashkenazim doesn't hold. They have special rabbi checking only the chelev.
The Torah holds the chelev. So if Ashkenazim hold the Torah, they also have to hold the chelev. It's a Isser in the Torah. You're saying that Ashkenazim, we don't use the whole back of the animal. That's because we hold the chelev.
We just take the whole limb off.
We don't, right, the whole hindquarters of the animal we don't use.
We don't try to trim the...
It's called nikor. We don't do nikor, right. Mm-hmm. But the point is, when Mashiach comes, okay, still there have to be butchers, and the butchers are going to have to know how to salt meat. They're going to have to know how to remove chelev. And also the many other Yisurim. So the Alter Rebbe is saying the notion that when Mashiach comes, we're not going to need to know the halachas. Where does that come from?
Yeah, and the festivals and the offerings.
Right. Yeah. V'gam and also all these things. V'gam and also tumas hameis. We're talking about the tumah of tumas meis. Yitzrichim leida. We'll have to know tumas meis. In other words, and today tumas meis is something which is relevant only for kehanim. Okay, and has to know different halachas of tumas meis and where he could go and where he can't go. But when Mashiach comes, the whole it becomes relevant to everyone. You want to go into the Beis Hamikdash, you want to eat karbanis. So and you know how many halachas that are associated with Tumas Meis? They're a crazy amount of halachas. It's not only the Tumas Meis, it's all the Hilchas Kalim, right? And what Keli becomes Tamei, and what today we're only worried about people. When Mashiach comes, it's about clothing and about utensils, and you have to. It's a huge like today we know kashrus is a big deal. You gotta want to become from, right? Learning the halachas of kashrus, the intricacies of kashrus is a big deal. In times of Beis Hamikdash, Mashiach comes, Tumah Tara is the same thing. Today we have what, 2 sets of dishes, and if you count Pesach, you have 4 sets of dishes. So then you have to have 8 sets of dishes because you have to have Tumah Tara. It's mikvahs. Everyone goes to mikvah. These are, and you know when halachas are associated with these. Taras is the hardest halachas that there is.
Like people's going to die, that would be Messiah Mashiach. I thought no one's going to die.
Kidiksiv, as the pasuk says, Hanar ben Meir Shana Yamis. That the pasuk says when Mashiach comes, the ones who will die young will die at 100. So Taka, there will be Arichas Yam when Mashiach comes, but the pasuk says that despite the longevity, when someone dies at 100, they'll say, "Oh, look at that Nebach. This person died young." But what do we see? That people will die. Now, how do we reconcile that with the Shitta, which is accepted by Chassidus, that L'chaim Nitzchim? Okay, see, first of all, maybe it's possible at different stages when Mashiach comes, but also, maybe it's talking about Goyim. And Goyim also have Tumas Meis. But the bottom line is, there will be, clearly we see that there will be Misa, there will be death, so we have to know the halachas of Tumas Meis.
Goyim have Tumas Meis?
Yeah. Machlokes are shining whether it's Tumas Oil. But the Tumas Meis for sure. There's a Shiloh only whether they're Metame Ba'oil, that's all.
Too much already.
Because the pasuk says Adam ki yamas ba'oil, so there's an opinion that says Atam kruyim Adam, that only Yidden are called Adam, so only Yidden are metame ba'oil, and there's machlokes harashayin and how we paskin. But for sure, but if a corpse of a goyish corpse has Tumas Meis for sure, no question.
Yeah, the corpse itself,
Yeah.
right, but not...
Yeah. And also Tumas Yildis. There's also Tumas Yildis we're going to have to deal with. When a woman gives birth, she's Tameh. Interesting is he doesn't bring down Tumas Nida. And it would seem that Alter Rebbe is saying that Mashiach comes, there won't be Tumas Nida. In other words, not that there won't be the Tumah, there won't be Nida. Which there are Midrashim that say that when Mashiach comes, there won't be Nida anymore. Because Nida is a result of...
Adam and Eve.
Right. So it's a result of Chet Tzadas, the punishment. So Mashiach comes, Nida there won't be. But Yildis, at the end of the day, women will give birth when Mashiach comes. And when women give birth, according to the Torah, there's a tumah.
For 30 days, 60
But
days,
animals
more
also
than that.
have a certain type of nida. Animals go through that, through
Okay.
certain nidus.
Okay. Maybe that was brought upon by us. It's a minor point. I don't want to go there.
It's not the same as for a woman, but it's similar.
There are Midrashim that say that Mashiach comes, there won't be Nida anymore. But Tumas Yildis there will be. A woman gives birth, there's Tumah involved. Yeah, whether it's 7 days, 14 days, and then there's the 33-day period, 66-day period, which you have in the beginning of Parshat Tazria. So Tzarech Leidan, we will have to know the halachas of Tumas Yildis. Keduksiv, as the pasuk says, Harav das Yachtov. The Mashiach comes, a woman will become pregnant and give birth immediately afterwards. In other words, the pregnancy will be very, very,
One day.
very quick. Im teled isha bechol yoyim. A woman will give birth every single day. Which raises the question: if a woman gives birth every single day, then how do we say there's Tumas Yildis? That seems to be a contradiction one to another. So Alter Rebbe continues and says, "Mebia achas." Very interesting, he says. That a woman will give birth every single day, but it'll be from one marital union, meaning husband and wife will be together once, and then for the next few months, every single day, the woman's giving birth to a baby from that one bia.
That's a lot.
Every single month?
Every single day. We have to remember, there won't be...
Every day?
Yeah. Let's go down to women over here, in this class over here, because I don't know how well they would take this.
It's 6.
But
How can she
I
take
need
care
you
of
to
her
consider
kids?
the whole...
She can't take care of her kids.
The
then.
whole pain of labor won't exist because, again, that's another product of Eitzadas. And in terms of help, there will be that's V'hayu Malachim Im Nayach V'Sariseim Nikesayach.
They will have a lot of maids, don't worry.
We'll have
What are they going to do?
Yeah. How does that? So basically, every morning, the woman will go for 10 minutes. Push out the baby, and boom, back to the day, and we have all the people taken care of. You don't have to worry about it. Akapanim, what's the point he's saying here? And then I guess after a few months of giving birth every single day, so then it's going to stop, and then obviously the woman's going to have to keep the halachas of and go to mikveh, because during this entire time
No mikveh.
If 36.
she's tamei.
Tumas Yoldis.
What's the oldest, right? And then you have to wait. The 7 days for a boy or 14 days for a girl, and then afterwards, the husband and wife are together again, and then again we start the process of every day having babies. But what's the point he's trying to bring out of here? Afal Begain, nevertheless, even though that it's going to be the whole process is going to change and women are going to be giving birth every day, but din isur tumasa le'yishtana. Tumah is not going to change. The din, why? Because of Zeis HaTorah leitei muchlefes. That's one thing we know for sure. That a mitzvah in the Torah doesn't change. So if the Torah says that Isha ki sazriya v'yolda zachar v'tama, right? So when Mashiach comes, if we know that the women will give birth, and we do, because the pasuk says harav yeladas yachdav, so you know it says when Mashiach comes, women are going to give birth. That means there's going to be the din of tumah. So if there's the din of tumah, how can we not learn the halachas of tumah? How can we say that we don't have to learn it? And then the way the Alter says it, but the ein laharich b'davar haposhet. Like it's even silly to go and speak at length about something which is so simple and so obvious that when Mashiach comes, we're going to need no halacha. Hefchei b'chol hashas u'medrashim. This is the opposite of everything we find in the entire Shas and the Medrash. For example, the part of the Gemara asks, Hilchas Mashiach. Right? There's some few places in Gemara where the Gemara a certain halacha is paskin. The Gemara says Hilchas Mashiach. In other words, machlekes. And the Gemara paskins one way, and so one Amira paskins one way, and another Amira comes along and says, well, Hilchas Mashiach, why are you paskening something? It's not relevant today. It's relevant when Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, the Sanhedrin will figure it out, they'll paskin. Which means that when Mashiach comes, what are you going to do? They're going to be sitting and going through the sugyas and paskening these halachas. And also, V'eliyahu ba livshit kolas fekas, right?
The tekus.
Right, all the tekus. Eliyahu Navi is going to come, and Mashiach's going to come, and he's going to teach us the halacha. And also, different places where it says this idea, Eliyahu will teach us. Again, the idea that Mashiach comes only Kabbalah, there's something wrong here. So that is the point. That is the second point. So again, the first point, every single, there's going to be three main points here, and each one of the points contains. The Alter Rebbe attacks it from many different directions and asks many questions. Again, the first large point was, how can you say that only Kabbalah is Eitz HaChaim and the rest of Torah is not? That was the first point. That took us a page, because the Alter Rebbe was, as they say, beating a dead horse with it. And then, now the Alter Rebbe is asking, he's saying, what are you saying that the Mashiach comes and not learning Kabbalah? That was the second big point. Now the third big point is something which I'm surprised that no one jumped at up until this point. Let's go back to the Rai Mehamda. Let's read inside. Go back to page.
The beginning, right?
Yeah, page Kuf Mem Beis. I want to start. See, the last word in the line is Dila. It's around probably 9 lines on the bottom. 8 lines on the bottom. See, Dila. I want to read some lines. Okay. Deloi Yisparnusum. The Mashiach comes. The Zohar tells us that at that time the Talmidei Chachamim will not receive their sustenance from Amei Aretz, the ignorant people. Elam Mesitra de Toiv. They're only going to receive their sustenance from the side of good. The Achlin Tahar Kosher Heter. From those that eat that which is pure and kosher and permitted. V'lei me'erev rav. Not from the Erev Rav. When Mashiach comes, we're not anymore going to receive any sustenance from the Erev Rav, the riffraff. The Achlin who they eat tumah, posel, asr, chulu. They eat that which is impure and posel and asr. And then he says, it was in the time when, now in Golos, when Eitz Hadas, Toivera is dominating, Inan Chachamim, the Damim, Lashabas, V'yam Toivim, the Chachamim, that are compared to Shabbos and Yom Tov, less Lahain Ela Madayav and Lahain Inun Chulin. They only have that which is given to them by the mundane. Ki Gavna, like the Yom HaShabbos, the Leslie, like the Shabbos, that only has Mada B'Saktin Le B'Yem Edachol. Only has where you prepare for it during the week. Basimna the Sholte Ilana the Chayev when Mashiach comes, and then what will dominate is the Eitz HaChaim. Iskafia Ilana the Tevera. Then the Eitz HaDas will be suppressed. V'lo yehi la'ami haaretz. Then it will be the opposite. The Ami haaretz will have Ella only Madiyav like Talmidei Chacham, that which is given to them by the Talmidei Chacham. V'Iskafia and Tchesayu, and they'll be suppressed beneath them. So, this is one of the more strange statements that there is over here. You're telling me that now in Golus, so Talmidei Chachamim, what do they eat? They eat that which is given to them by the Ami Haaretz, which is Puzzle and Treif and Tomei. When Mashiach comes,
How's that possible?
what does that mean? What does that mean? Let's do this inside.
Stuff.
So he didn't move on. Furthermore, it's not understood. Masha Kasa, that which is written in the Zohar, late Sparnus and Talmidei Chacham Ami Haaretz Chul, that Talmidei Chachamim, when Mashiach comes, will not receive their sustenance any longer from the Ami Haaretz. V'lei me'erev Rav, and not from the Erev Rav, the Achlin who eat Posel Tamei v'Aser Chas v'Shalom. What does that mean? Dagam Bezman Bayesheni, also in times of the second Beis Hamikdash, which is what we're talking about over here, right? This is the Silberberg Chai is talking. Lehayim Mispanis in Ami Haaretz Chas v'Shalom, to say that Talmidei Chacham at that time they received their sustenance from the ignorant people. The Achlin Posel Aser Chas v'Shalom, who ate the Posel and Aser Chas v'Shalom. Sharei Talmidei Chachamim. In times of the Beis Hamikdash, Talmidei Chachamim, they had fields and they had vineyards just like the Ami Haaretz. They do not rely on the Ami Haaretz for their food. And nevertheless, what did they learn? Not Kabbalah. With Isser, Veheter, they learned Isser, Veheter, Vetuma, Vetara. Kol HaZugis Shoei Bayesheni. All the Zugis that were in the times of the Bayesheni, we know that there was the Zugis, right? Hillel and Shammai, Naftali, and we have in Pirkei Avos, right? Shimon Prachia and Nitei Arbeli, the peers. What? Right? V'hemidu Talmidim la'alafim u'ravavis, and they taught and they raised students, thousands, tens of thousands, v'limud hanister behester, and all the while, secretly they learned Kabbalah also. So that's the third large idea. So just a little context over here. When we're saying here the word Am Haaretz, in general, we say Am Haaretz, we translate it as an ignorant person. But in halacha, especially when you're talking about in halacha, you talk about Am Haaretz. So if you think that someone who thinks that Am Haaretz is an ignorant person is an ignorant person. That's not the meaning of Am Haaretz. Am Haaretz, if you look in Mishnah and Gemara, is the opposite of what's called a chaver. A chaver is someone who's careful about Tumah and Tara, and careful about Trumas and Meisers. And someone who's not careful about it could be a very big scholar, but he's called an Am Haaretz. That's in the Gemara and the Mishnah. That's what Am Haaretz is. And in times of already the Mishnah, so this already started in times of the second Beis Hamikdash. In the first Beis Hamikdash, there wasn't any widespread phenomenon of Yidden who weren't from. It didn't really exist. Everyone was from. All the Yidden were from. I mean, there were many Yidden also on the side that were Evdei Avodah Zarah, but other than that, they were from. It's a little of a strange phenomenon, but that's the Metzias. The idea of Yidden and official branches of Yidden who were not from, that started in times of
They
Bayesheni.
just may have had Avodah Zarah in their houses. They may have had Avodah Zarah in their house.
But they were from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like today, there are people who are from also have Avodah Zarah in their house.
Oh, television.
Modern day Avodah Zarah, right? And they're from, right? They're from, right?
They mean television.
So,
Yes.
what's the point? The point is that you could be from, right, and
Yeah.
still have a time. But the people were from. And Bayesheni is when you started having movements of people who weren't from. So look in Baitusim. And you had this idea is that today, Baruch Hashem, you go to the store, you want to buy yourself a case of bottle of Coke, you want to buy yourself, what do you have over there? Some cake over there, right? No. So you had some of the cake.
Maybe someone did.
Who had cake? Reuven, you had some cake?
Before.
How did you know it's kosher?
It says so in this, it's kosher.
Oh,
To rely on.
very good. So today we have something called,
It's certified.
we have certification.
Certification, yeah.
So back in Bayesheng, they didn't have certification, which is a problem. Why is it a problem? Because then, well, you can't even, in Eretz Yisrael, you can't even buy an apple without knowing whether, is it taka,
The mice are not the mice.
right? Truma Meiser. And you have to understand, it's not like Musa Meisers. Then you also have the issue of Tumah V'Tara. Something which it's not even on our horizon today to think about. But if you were a chaver, and you were careful about Tumah V'Tara, forget about buying. You can't even touch an Amaretz. Because maybe he's Tameh. And that's why, at that time, the Fruma Yidden were called Prushim. Why are they called the Prushim? They were separate because they separated themselves from the Ami Aretz because, again, they couldn't buy anything from them. They couldn't, and that's why there's a whole Masechta called Masechtas Demai, right? Which is about if you do buy produce from Ami Aretz, like what to do about Trumas Meitzers, etc. So, already in the times of Bayi Sheni, and there's a lot of halachas about this, about how to, if Ami Aretz wants to become a chaver, how does he become a chaver? He has to be Mekabel, Divri Chaverus. And what if a chaver slips and he becomes a chashud? So, back already in times of Bayesheni, you already had the system where the Talmidei Chacham, again, Talmidei Chacham didn't mean necessarily the people who are big scholars, but we're talking about the Fruma Yidden. They had their own economy, they had their own system, and they had their own sources of produce, and they didn't get from Mami Yaretz. They didn't associate with them because it concerns the Trumas Meisters, all these things he's saying here, Pasul, Kasher, and Tameh, right? All these things. And here the Zohar is making it sound that the big chiddush is when Mashiach comes, because then what will dominate will be the Eitz HaChaim. So then suddenly Talmidei Chacham will be self-subsistent. But now Talmidei Chachamim are reliant upon the Ami Aretz. And again, the now of the Zohar is Mizman Abayis. Rabbi says, just historically, factually speaking, it's incorrect.
Opposite.
So that's
Is
the
the Zohar talking Haftacha or Metzias?
It's being maftiach what the Metzias will be. So, what we have over here is, again, three basic large objections to the Zohar, which, again, Sheldon, is all based on a misunderstanding of the Zohar, which is what we're going to find out. But again, number one is, the Zohar, it seems to imply or insinuates, or even says so clearly, that Kabbalah, Zohar is Eitz HaChaim, and the rest of the Torah is Eitz HaDas.
But that doesn't.
Issue number
even
one.
if that would be true, that could be theoretically that I could live with that notion theoretically. But when it gets to the practical, that we're not going to learn Isser v'Heter, then it becomes practical and a practical problem.
So the second question resonates with you more. The second issue is the contention that when Mashiach comes, we're only going to learn Kabbalah, except for the Erev Rav. Poor Erev Rav, they're still going to be stuck with their Daf Yomi. Right? Because that's what it says over here. It says over here that Mashiach comes, the Erev, look inside, what does it says?
Oh my god.
You look at page 284.
Who are they calling Erev Rav then? I mean, that's Erev Rav is Goyim, not.
Doesn't sound it. It says here.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
I think it means those who don't learn Kabbalah. And they're still going to be under the dominion of Eitz HaDas, and therefore they are going to still have to learn V'tzorech loin masnisin be'isr v'heter tumah v'tara. They're still going to need the Mishnahs of Isr v'heter tumah v'tara. That's what it says. So that's objection number two. Objection number three is just the statement of fact that now Talmidei Chachamim are reliant upon Ami Aretz, who eat pasal treif tameh. That's just not the reality. It's not the reality.
Situation.
Is the Rebbe raising these questions because he became aware that people at his time raised these problems and he's trying to set them straight?
So we don't know.
It's
why
a spiritual food. It's not a physical thing, right?
Sorry?
It's a spiritual. Food.
What's
Spiritual food, not physical.
No.
They had Demai.
Seems they're talking physical.
Oh.
Yeah.
They had Demai in those days because they couldn't trust people.
Right. Right.
So
Right. But the Mai wasn't their primary source of food. Apparently, the Mai was the exception. They had their Talmidei Chacham had their own independent economy running with their own, their own system of buyers and sellers who were trustworthy.
Are they getting produce from Turkey and other places? Why are you laughing?
Depends what kind of produce you're talking about.
Other from outside the Chutz La'aretz.
Some things, yes. Most things not, but some things, yeah. I was just, last year with Shmitas, I read a fascinating article last year that, Eretz Yisrael and Shmitas, so it's, there are some people who rely on what's called the Heter Mechira. Many, many people don't rely on the Heter Mechira. Heter is selling the land to the Arabs. So where do they get the produce? Where do the Charedim get their produce from? So a lot of it comes from Arabs in Eretz Yisrael. A lot of it comes from Arabs in Eretz Yisrael, because if an Arab owns land, then that's fine. The problem is, you're buying something from an Arab. How do you know it's really from an Arab? How do you know that the Arab is not just acting as a front, as a middleman for some Jewish farmer who wants to unload his produce, which is right? So I have a fascinating article, the Iggeres. They have an entire network. And the problem is that a lot of these farms of these Arabs are in places where it's dangerous to go. So they can't even say that they have a mashgiach who's coming in and popping by and checking up. They can't even have that. But at the same time, these Arab farms, they want to get a hechsher, because that's their business. And I'm assuming also they probably charge more because they know that it's shmita. So the Iggeres is a whole system of surveillance cameras and drones. Yeah. Which they run, and there's a big office in.
So they need TVs. You see, sometimes you need a TV in your house to watch the
right near Meir Sharim, a room filled with technology, and you have these room people sitting there watching the screens, watching what's going on in all these Arab villages. And befeiros, they catch the Arabs, because as much as you want to, they're always busy trying to outsmart you, and they catch them. And as soon as you catch, it's one strike and you're out. In this case, but back in the day, times by Sheni, they didn't have that. They didn't have those systems, so that's why there was the Prussian. Anyways, but the question...
By Sheni, they didn't have Arabs.
That's also true. No, they did, but maybe not Eretz Yisrael.
The Arab probably came around the 5th, 6th century.
The Muslims, not the Arabs.
The Muslims, yeah.
You had Arabs in times of Abraham.
Yeah, yes. The Muslims,
Yeah.
that attack us.
But the question is, why is it that what's the Alter Rebbe? We have a sefer from the Mittler Rebbe called B'Yuri Azer. There's a sefer from the Tzemach Tzedek called B'Yuri Azer. Also, just now, actually, just in Kos yesterday, they printed a volume 3 of the B'Yuri Azer from the Tzemach Tzedek. Just came out from print for the first time.
It's a commentary.
Printed commentary in Zer, yeah.
Like Dvash, it's every.
No. That's a simple meaning. We're talking about much deeper, yeah. So Alter Rebbe also had B'Yuri Azer. But we don't find that Alter Rebbe and Tanya explaining different passages of the Zohar. This is the only part in Tanya that Alter Rebbe devotes a great amount of time talking about this. And this also, if you remember, this comes... There is some sort of order in Iggeres HaKodesh. So this is chapter 26. The chapter beforehand was chapter 25. For those of you who remember chapter 25, it was a letter to the Misnagdim in Vilna, defending a certain passage of the Tzava Sarivash. And it seems that this also over here, the next perek is a similar idea, which is the Chassidus, one of the big chidushim of Chassidus is that Kabbalah for the masses, absolutely. That's one of the ideas of, which wasn't something which was the accepted practice at that time. And here we have this passage of the Zohar that seemingly talks about Kabbalah being the Eitz HaChaim and everything else being Eitz HaDas. And possibly, because we don't know, but possibly this whole piece that Alter Rebbe is writing over here is to really explain what is the place of Chassidus and Kabbalah, what is the place of Nigla, what is the relationship with each other, what does it mean when we say that Kabbalah is Eitz HaChaim, which is what we're going to be learning with Hashem in the coming weeks. But the context over here, again, I'm going to emphasize, possibly, is the renewed focus on learning Kabbalah, which came as a result of learning Chassidus, which created that need to really expound on this particular passage of the Zohar, which defines Kabbalah, and to give an understanding what it is. And by the time we finish this perek, Yemir Hashem, we'll have a deeper understanding both of Nigla Torah and why befeiros we have to learn Nigla Torah, and why actually in Galus that's the main avodah is dafka learning Nigla. We'll have a deeper understanding of of Kabbalah and how great Kabbalah is, and we'll get there. But it's this is at the core. This is at the core. This is at the core of what Chassidus is really understanding what Kabbalah is and what role it plays in its life, in our
We
life.
still make a case for Daf Yomi because there's many people learning. So what value is there in such a thing?
I can't answer that question, obviously, because we have a ways to go. But I think that by the time we finish the perek, we'll be able to make a very strong case for it.
What's the
Yes.
statement, Velo Am Haaretz Hasid?
Sorry?
Velo Am Haaretz Hasid.
Yeah.
What that mean?
A chassid, in the words of Chazal, is someone who goes lifnim meshurat adin. Lifnim meshurat adin.
Okay.
And if you're Amaretz, and you don't know what the din is, and you certainly can't go with Nimbishers in it.
You cannot be a chassid.
You can't be a chassid because you can't go beyond the letter of the law if you don't even know what the law is.
Oh, it's a
Reb Chaim speaks about this. And it's interesting, he says, at the beginning of Parashat HaKodesh, he says that he brings down the Amaretz chassid, and he says there's a certain person who's Amaretz, but he decided he's going to do a very big hidur. He wants a very big hidur. He wants to have very holy children. So he decided that he's only going to be intimate with his wife on Yom Kippur. And this way the children will be very holy. Reb Chaim says this.
Yeah.
And this day you're not
He
allowed
says,
to.
and he says that's what it means le'amaris chassid. You know, if you're amaris, you can't be a chassid if you're an amaris. You're trying.
Yeah.
Okay.